Hey, thanks for taking the time to go through this quick 15-minute video updating you on this fall deadline and what's changed in the Big Beautiful Bill and what we suggest that you do going forward. So my name's Corey. I'm with KW Insurance. I'm going to take you through the common crop insurance options here as far as unit structure goes, at least. That is a decision you need to make for your wheat by this deadline. So there's multiple ways you can structure your farm. Optional units is the most expensive. That allows you to break your databases all the way down to the section level, or have a claim paid down to the section level if you don't farm across the section lines there. It's the most expensive. It's considerably cheaper to be in enterprise units, which we'll go through in this presentation. But for some of you guys, if you're really spread out, this might be a viable option. The basic unit just means the units are just broke down to the share level. So if you have share leases versus your 100% stuff, it'll separate it that way. Enterprise units by type, this is the most common. So government pays 80% of your premium if you do this. It's going to throw all your spring wheat together in one pot, all the winter wheat together in one pot, and like all the durum together in one pot. But at least it keeps the types separate. Gives you a substantial discount on your premium, which allows you to buy up, be at higher levels for probably cheaper than 60%. Optional units might be more money than what you'd be at 75 in enterprise in this scenario, or close. So very common for guys to be at 75% in that unit structure, which we'll go through in a separate slide here. None of your crops should say EU on them unless it's barley or other crops where we can't split the types up. But for pulse crops and wheat, it should say ET. So if you look at your app and it says EU next to wheat or the peas, we definitely want that to be ET, because the ET is enterprise units by type. That allows us to keep the spring wheat separate from the winter wheat, separate from the durum. If it says EU on there, that's going to combine spring wheat, winter wheat, and durum together before it pays out. So if you're an irrigated guy, we could actually elect to have it separated by irrigated practice instead of by the types. Problem with doing that is if you do multiple types of, let's say, irrigated wheat. So if you had irrigated winter and irrigated spring, it's going to throw the types together in that scenario, and the same thing on the dry land. But it would keep the dry land separate from the irrigated. So that's an option if you're a guy that likes to do planting and has irrigated and dry land. We can plan your seeding out to make that really work well for you. And then if you do organic, we can do enterprise units by organic practice as well. Not many people doing that. So like it shows on this slide, enterprise units by type is the very most common. We can do that on wheat, and we can do it on peas right now. And we can't do that on barley quite yet. So new in 2022, now we can separate. In 2022, they allowed us to then start separating in enterprise units, winter wheat, spring wheat, and durum, where before our only option was to be in enterprise units instead of by type, and that would have combined those types together back then. So made it much more viable to do enterprise units if you're a winter, spring, and durum type guy. Same for peas. Now the chickpeas, the lentils, even the types of chickpeas are separate in separate enterprise units. Not available for barley yet. So if you do feed and malt varieties, it's going to combine the two varieties together for your claim and your guarantees together before it pays out, but you'll still have the big discount. It'll just combine the two, just so you know. Same premium as before, but you need to make sure, same premium discount as before for these enterprise units. But now if you do it by type, you need to have at least 20 or more acres per section in two different sections to qualify for that discount. So this next slide is going to give us an example of how this sometimes gets done incorrectly, especially when you do winter and spring wheat, let's say, on your farm. So let's say in this example, you have 100 acres of winter wheat in section 1, 40 acres in section 2. There's more than 20 acres of each of winter wheat in those two sections. So that qualifies us for the enterprise unit discount. But then if you go out in the spring and you just seed one section to spring wheat, now we don't have the other 20 acres of spring wheat seeded in another section somewhere to match that up with. So that by default would then throw your spring wheat back together with your winter wheat. Now to do this correctly, obviously we would seed two sections to 20 or more acres of winter wheat in the fall, and then go out in the spring and seed two sections of 20 or more acres of spring wheat in two separate sections. And when we have a claim, then that will keep the winter wheat separate from your spring wheat and still give you the big discount. We'd also have the option on that previous slide to pay the optional unit premium on your spring wheat that only has one section on it. Sometimes that's worth it, sometimes not for you guys. But either way, if you can do 20 or more acres of each type in two different sections, that makes this work so much better. So why do we do this? So here's a quote from this year, 31 bushel continuous crop winter wheat. And so in optional units, that's $9.48 for $134 a guarantee. If you put that together into enterprise units, that drops that down to $3.45. So substantial difference in the premium for comparable levels. One's the subsidy because the government's paying 80% of your premium on the enterprise unit thing, but also because the risk is lower for them because they're going to throw it together in one pot. But why we like to look at this is if you're only willing to spend $3.45 on your crop insurance, I think you're better off for the whole farm to be shifted up in levels than to keep things separate and have it at a low level on the underlying part. Your odds of getting paid go up quite a bit. The other thing that we'll do then is stack ECO and SEO on top of this, which we'll get to in some slides coming forward here. Real quick review on losses for this year. If you guys had the malt barley endorsement, so you were in revenue protection on barley and you had the malt barley endorsement, just a quick review of how that would work if your stuff got rejected this year. If you have 10,000 bushels of barley, let's say it all got rejected, you get $4 a bushel for your feed barley. You had an $8 malt contract that we used to up the guarantee on your insurance. So you got 50% of what you should have for your feed barley versus what you should have got for malt. So real simplistically, you only got 50% of what you should have for the price, so they're only going to count 50% of the 10,000 bushels or 5,000 bushels for your claim. Soft white wheat futures too, in this scenario, we're going to say drop 20%. So that's what they use for your malt barley is the soft white wheat futures for the revenue protection. So because we're in revenue protection and in the malt endorsement, we got the reduction once already for it not making malt. We'd get another reduction kind of because the price dropped. So they'd take in essence another 1,000 bushels off of that or only count 4,000 bushels for your claim. So if any of you guys have malt quality issues, we need to get those samples submitted ASAP because we only get 60 days from harvest to get those samples pulled. If you were in yield protection with contract pricing, if that's how they applied your barley contract, all the bushels would be counted and the grain would be valued at $8 a bushel still. So you wouldn't get the revenue drop or the quality adjustment part. They also would then, on that previous example, if you had some sprout issues, not only would you get those reductions and get it down to 4,000 bushels, we'd also go on the charge for the feed barley and reduce your bushels even farther if you had that issue as well. So the malt endorsement can really compound these losses to be way bigger losses than they would be if you were in yield protection using your contract that way. Quality issues, always have bin samples taken on yours when there's potential quality issues if you're even close to a loss. You have 60 days from harvest, so that would be from when you finished harvesting that unit, or if you're in enterprise units, when you finish harvesting that crop, we get 60 days to get those samples submitted. So make sure as you're harvesting stuff, if you have a claim or you think you're even close to a claim, turn the claim in, we'll get an adjuster out there, we'll have them pull the samples, and we need to get that done within 60 days of harvest. On wheat, we'll consider things like falling numbers that are 300 or below, US grade number 5 or worse, sprout damage, those sorts of things would knock your bushels back to pay you more in a claim. Barley, same thing, US number 5 or worse. Damaged kernels, once it gets above 10%, the reduction ramps up pretty quickly on that. And then canola has a similar thing as well. If you had damaged kernels or sample grade canola, that would be a huge reduction. It would kick you possibly into a claim or increase your claim payment. So here's just one example of how if you have revenue protection and you have a quality loss, it can generate a loss even if you're not what appears to be even close to a claim. So this one, we're going to say we had a 40 bushel average winter wheat yield. We took the 75% level of our insurance, so we're guaranteed 30 bushels an acre. We had a $6 base price, so $180 an acre guarantee. You harvest 40 bushels, so you cut your average yield, so it's pretty good, right? But your wheat came back with only 220 falling numbers because we had some issues with rain at harvest here. So, and then at the same time, the price dropped to $5. So these are scenarios that are happening this year, basically, right? So the first thing they're going to do is go on the charts and say, for you 220 falling numbers, we'll reduce your bushels here by 14.2%. So they're going to take 5.7 bushels off of what you harvested and only count 34.3 bushels of 34 bushels for your claim. So we're still above our 30 bushel guarantee, but remember they're going to value the 34 bushels at only $5 a bushel because we're in revenue protection as well, right? So only $171 an acre of value for the claim. Remember our guarantee was $180. So in this scenario, we generate a shallow loss even though we cut our average yield on our wheat. of about $8.50 an acre. This can ramp up a lot if that became sample grade wheat or we had some other quality issues, but I just wanted to show you how just even little blips of things like the price dropping and maybe having some falling number issues can generate a claim when you don't think that you have one sometimes. On P and lentil adjustments, those are a lot more straightforward. So as long as it's on their list of things that can be a quality issue, which most of them are on there, if it makes them US number 2 or less, they just take what you got for the number 2 or less pulse crops and divide that into what you should have had for number 1s and use that for your reduction. So in this scenario, you're only going to get 15 cents a bushel because your lentils graded number 3. You should have had a pound, sorry. You should have had 25 cents a pound at the elevator if they were number 1s. So it's pretty simple. They just divide 15 into 25. You got 60% of the price you should have received if they were number 1s. So they're only going to count 6,000 bushels or 60% of the 10,000 against you for your claim. So we just want to highlight why it's important to get samples pulled, especially on pulse crops, because those will just come back sample grade on stuff that looks pretty good to the naked eye. So always have samples pulled on pulses if you can. But remember, again, it must be sampled within 60 days of harvest. Other important dates, termination date's 11/30 for winter wheat or for wheat. So you have to pay your wheat premium from the previous year by the 30th of November or it'll terminate your policy for the next year. We definitely don't want to miss that date. That's a hard one to fix. And then your winter wheat, you actually have till November 15th to get that seeded. Before we start having yield reductions, you have to seed it by October 30th to still have the winter option on there. So positive changes for 26, just real quick, they upped your subsidy from 65% to 80% on the ECO and SCO, the county programs. So government's now going to pay 80% of your premium in the county programs. This makes this pretty much a no-brainer to get into those. New breaking now is insurable without written agreements. You'll just get 85% of the county average for the first year you seed something that's like CRP that had been out a long time or hay that hadn't been seeded in a while. If you do that kind of stuff, you get 85% of the county average. Acreage emerging from CRP, you now get 3 years instead of 2 years from when it came out of the program to get it seeded and still get 100% of the county average. And native sod's now insurable the first year that it's seeded. On native sod, though, all the other rules are the same. So you're still only going to get 65% of the county average the first 4 years on native sod. How's my premium going to compare this year to last if I did exactly the same thing? And this is where those extra subsidies really shine here. So in 25, for exactly the same coverage for 38 bushel summer, fall, and winter wheat here, you would have paid $13 an acre to be in revenue protection and enterprise units. SCO and ECO would be $13. This year, because your SCO and ECO premium got knocked in half, basically, you're now paying $7.66 an acre for the same guarantee as you would have been paying $13 on the year before. So real positive changes. That all changed in this big, beautiful bill. They also increased the beginning farmer rancher discount. So if you have a kid coming back, make sure you start them on their own entity. Make sure you start them with a fair number of acres if possible, because the discount is gigantic on this thing for the first several years. So your barley PLC price increased to $5.45. That means barley will now, it looks like, trigger PLC payments for the 25 crop year for you guys. So we're back into where the commodity prices are low enough that we're going to start getting those FSA payments again. Wheat went from $5.56 a bushel in this bill up to $6.35, which was a huge increase as well. So that looks like it'll trigger $1.05 a bushel payment at the moment on wheat, and that could get better before it finishes averaging for the 25 crop year. So big payments coming from the FSA on PLC. You won't get those till the fall of 26 for the 25 crop year, but at least we can put those on our balance sheet. Also a one-time chance to increase base acres. And like I said, the subsidies went way up on the crop insurance end. On the big beautiful bill, you're going to get the better of ARC or PLC for 25. PLC will be the one that'll trigger for most of us the most, I think, so you'll probably get that. So if you elected ARC in 25 and PLC pays better, you're going to get the PLC payment just for this 1 year because things are so bad. Also remove the SCO and ARC rule so we can be in that SCO county program on the crop insurance side and in ARC at the FSA together now. That's a real positive. And then there was a bunch of tax stuff that was advanced forward that had kind of timed out on the previous tax bill. So big one is that we can Section 179 equipment and do 100% bonus depreciation for the next 4 years. So big deal on tax planning. Beginning farmer rancher, now they changed that from 5 years to 10 years that you can realize this discount. Need to fill out an app before this deadline to qualify, but for the first 2 years, you get an additional 15 points of premium subsidy. So if for SEO and ECO or enterprise units, if the government's already paying 80% of your premium, now they pay 95% of your premium if you're a beginning farmer. So huge discount. Third year, it goes to 13 points extra subsidy. Fourth year, 11, and then they get 5 more years after that of an extra 10 points of subsidy, or half the premium of what a traditional farmer would pay. Here's a quote from this year. So traditional farming, not beginning farmer, would pay $728 for this coverage here, recrop winter wheat. A beginning farmer that's into the 5 to 10 year range would pay $364, so half of what the traditional farmer would. Then if you're in your first 2 years of the beginning farmer thing, you're only paying $1.82 an acre, so substantial discounts for guys that are just getting going. And that's why we say, if you're going to plan to put your kid into the farming operation, don't add him onto your corporation as a shareholder, because you won't get any of these benefits because you've timed stuff out on there already. So start that new person on their own policy if possible, and let them realize these benefits. And there's other stuff through the FSA they'd realize as well. And native sod breaking, you don't get a very good yield for the first 4 years if you do that, and you'll lose a lot of your subsidy. But the very biggest thing is talk to the FSA before you break out anything on your maps that says SOD on it. Native sod's a real hot button issue with keeping that preserved. And if we do that, we need to make sure we have a plan. The FSA, if you don't do that part, you could lose all your subsidy. So CRP breaking, once again, you get 3 crop years now to take that out and seed it. From the time it comes out of the program, and still get 100% of the county average. Added land, if you get over 2,000 acres, talk to us, but basically you're either stuck with the county average for that land that you're adding, or you can use the other producers' yields if we do a share lease, if they have better yields than the county average. But if you're going to add over more than 2,000 crop acres, give us a call, because we want to make sure we get that planned out ahead of time for you guys so you can realize the best yields on that new stuff. Triticale is insurable. In a lot of our counties now, they actually added Hill and Glacier this year. So if you do triticale or triticale and you grow it for seed, we can insure that, and we can actually use a contract to increase the price on it. Your base price would be $5.17 a bushel without a contract. If you can get a contract to grow it for seed, we can go up to $11.73. No ECO, SEO, or revenue protection on that crop. So forage wheat grown for grain, there was a guy that kind of fell through the cracks on this at a different agency that I had talked to. But Ray and Willow Creek winter wheat are both considered forage varieties. If you seed those with the intent of harvesting them for grain, like seed them just to harvest it for seed or just grow it as winter wheat, those have to have a written agreement done to make that be insurable by September 30th for fall types and March 15th for spring types, just FYI. So your price for winter wheat this year, you're going to actually start this fall at $5.79 a bushel. Last year, on 2025, we started at $6 and the harvest price ended up at $5.05. So about 84% of where we started at. That means you can cut about 16% more bushels and still be in a claim in that scenario, because the revenue dropped, right? Or they value your production at less. For 26, you're going to start at $5.79 a bushel. The reason that price is higher than the harvest price was for 25 is they're using the futures market a whole year out on that, and that price is higher. So starting about where we started last fall, which at least is a little bit of a positive with these price drops. This once again just shows how we compare premium 25 to 26 for the same coverage. Basically, we're paying half the premium, right? Other crops last year in 25, most of the wheats dropped around 15%. Canola's only down to about 2%. That's still getting averaged right now, but it's probably not going to end up dropping very much. Oats down 18%, flax 2% because it uses the canola futures for that, and then barley down about 19%. That's a corn future that they use to track that. So if you're even on the borderline of having a claim, make sure you turn one in, because it's possible with the revenue drops you might be in one actually. And if you have any kind of quality issues, if you compound that on top of the revenue, you certainly might. If you have malt barley contract and we use the malt endorsement, that would actually have dropped your malt contract price $1.09 a bushel, and that's how they would increase your loss payment there. So how does revenue protection work? If the price goes up in the spring, let's say we start at $5 a bushel, you have a 30 bushel guarantee, you'd be guaranteed $150 an acre payment. You harvest 10 bushels an acre, but then we're going to say the price of wheat goes up to $10 a bushel when they do the harvest price. So for your claim, first off, they're going to increase your guarantee to $300 an acre. So they're going to take your 30 bushel guarantee, but now take it times $10. So if you cut 0 wheat in this unit, you'd get $300 an acre back, even though you paid premium on 150. So this is what happens when it goes up. You harvested 10 bushels of production. The 10 bushels is valued at $10 for your claim, or $100 worth of production. So you now have a $300 guarantee. You harvested $100 worth of crops, so we have a $200 an acre loss payment because the price went up so much, right? So we actually got paid a $200 an acre loss payment in this scenario and only started with $150 an acre guarantee, but that increased because the harvest price was up. This is why it's so important to be in revenue protection, because this happens year after year where the volatile prices bounce around. So what happens if it goes down at harvest? If it goes down, they never drop your guarantee. So that's another real positive on the crop insurance side. So start at $10 a bushel base price times $30 a bushel, or 30 bushel an acre guarantee. So we start at $300 in this scenario. We're going to say we harvested a 30 bushel crop. So remember, we have a 30 bushel guarantee. Normally, if we were in yield protection, we wouldn't have a claim, right? But now the price has dropped to $5. The 30 bushels you cut in the crop insurance size is worth $5 a bushel, not the 10 that we started at. Doesn't matter if you marketed your grain and you're selling it at $10 at the elevator. It just all depends on what happened with the futures. So in the crop insurance size, you cut $150 an acre of grain. And so we have a $300 an acre guarantee. We actually cut right at our guarantee, but it's only valued at $5. So we have a $150 an acre loss trigger there. So just wanted to remind you guys how revenue protection works and why it's so important to be in that side of this stuff. The same thing happens on the ECO and SCO. If you're in those county programs, if you're an RP, you're also in that on these county programs. So in this scenario, we had $324 of expected revenue in the county based off a 36 bushel wheat average. We're going to say we actually cut 38 bushels for the county for wheat, but the price dropped to $7. When that happened, that means we only cut $266 an acre of revenue for the county. So the county came in at 82% of its expected value. In ECO, all it has to do is get down to 86% of average. You get all your money out of that program. So you get all your ECO payment and part of your SCO payment, because we are below 86% in that scenario as well. But most importantly, just so you can see, revenue can trigger these county programs because they're shallow loss programs, even if we cut kind of a decent crop for the county sometimes. Those ECO and SCO programs, they stack on top of your underlying crop insurance. They're triggered at the county level, but then they'll just stack that much more of a payment on top of each one of your units. So basically, if we hit a drought and the county triggers 100% on those programs and you have an underlying loss, let's say, you're going to be made whole all the way up to 95% of what your average yields are on your policy in that scenario. So really big deal on cash flow. That's usually the difference between losing money if you're just getting paid the 75% on your crop insurance to stacking those payments and possibly making you break even or better, hopefully. On top of that, then we can stack PLC or ARC on top of those programs, and those are going to be triggering again. PLC is the one you want to be in right now because the price is so low. So how have those paid? Historically, through our agency, we had $12 million of roughly paid in on that program and $42 million paid out so far. So huge payouts for what producers have paid in. This chart would look even better because the premium would have been half of that had the subsidy been that high in the past. So really a big fan of these programs helping out when we hit drought years. One thing that's affecting them is our yields are getting drugged down as we're hitting droughts. As you can see, Toole County dropped quite a bit, and so did Liberty. Glacier dropped a bit, and Pend Oreille went up actually for a while because they had better yields. But just like our underlying yield histories, and we're in drought years, it drags it down, and when we hit better years, it'll come back up. So, in real important note, ECO and SCO, those county programs don't pay out till May of the following year because they have to get all the yields and stuff in for the crop insurance before they can pay that out. ARC is the least likely to program to pay right now at the FSA, so elect PLC if you have a choice for 26 because the prices are so low. PLC is very likely to pay this next year, or will pay for this next crop year, especially since they raised those base prices. As you can see on this slide, we'll get about $1.05 a bushel right now on wheat, and I think that'll get better before it finishes averaging. How does PLC work? Just a quick refresher for you guys. It's been a few years since this triggered, but they take the trigger price right now, which is $6.35 a bushel, minus whatever wheat is currently on the market year average for wheat through the whole U.S., which is $5.30. So $1.05 a bushel payment. They take that times whatever your yield is for your farm number at the FSA for those base acres. They pay on 85% of your base. So in this scenario, we had 1,000 acres of base acres. They're only going to pay on 850 of that. But the $1.05 payment rate times we're going to say you had a 40 bushel average for that farm number for wheat at the FSA, it'd be $42 an acre times those acres. And those payments would come out in October of 26, basically. ARC pays similar to SCO, where it uses yield and price, but it's capped at $19.58 for the 25 crop year, so more than likely PLC is going to be your better program. Should I consider ARC and stack it on top of SCO? Not now that the prices are low, I don't think so. I'd take PLC till these prices rebound, and then once they do, if we get some years of better prices, being an ARC will make more sense, I think. Is there more disaster money coming? There's now talk of bridge payments coming because of the incredibly poor farm economy at the moment. So I think there's a really good chance you're going to get some sort of flat tariff payment here for the 25 crop year. Probably here in the next 4 to 6 months, somewhere in that ballpark. There's also stage 2 of that SDRP program. So if you didn't qualify for stage 1 of that, if you had some shallow losses on your farm, you might qualify then. And so we'll be digging into your numbers here and see if you'd qualify and let you know if you're going to trigger. That'll be coming out in October, possibly as well. SEO and ECO payments for next year. This is the hardest year I've ever seen to predict that, because parts of these counties were really pretty good, parts quite bad. So really it's kind of in a wait and see mode for these. But when we get all the production numbers in from you guys, then I'll have a really good grasp of where we're at. I can data mine some of that, and I'll let you know what to put on your budget sheets for those crops. So what are the odds of these ECO and SEO programs paying? So we're going to just do a $20 an acre coverage thing for ECO as an example. It'd cost you $258 in premium now. That would have been $497 in premium last year before the subsidy went up. So it just needs to pay out 1 out of every 8 years to break even on this program. Statistically, because it starts paying when the county gets below 95% of its average, and we can use revenue to trigger it, it should pay every other year. So, or every 1 out of every 3 years at the least. So because the government's paying so much of your premium in here, if you're an odds guy, your odds of getting your money back are exceptionally high. And the only way that's not going to happen is if we have average or above yields in the county for multiple years in a row, which means you did well yourself, probably anyways. The SCO that doesn't trigger till you get below 86% average, $210 an acre for the premium, $25 a coverage. So it only needs to pay 1 out of every 12 years to get all your money out of that program. And so incredibly likely, it's paid in Tooele County, it paid 9 out of the last 10 years. And in Glacier County, I think it was like 7 out of the last 8 years that program had triggered. So quite likely you're going to get your money back out of that. But even if you don't, that means the county had decent yields. If you're not getting paid on that, and it means you probably did okay on your individual farm. So on your revenue protection, that's also a really good deal in enterprise units. It only needs to pay out 1 out of every 28 years to get your money back out of it with the enterprise unit premium. So, and remember, in revenue protection, sometimes those payments can be doubled by the price going up, which happened in 21. So all these scenarios are based off of just using your base price. If you got more than that because the price went up and we hit a drought, then that even changes those metrics more in your favor, basically. If you're a cattle guy, it's a really good time to do LRP. We are at way historic high prices in the cattle market. And if you preg checked already and you plan on, let's say, video sailing your calves in June, we can now probably put LRP on to put a bottom in that market all the way out to June for you for not a lot of money per head. And that leaves all the upside. So if you're a cattle guy interested in looking into that, please let us know. It's easy to quote and a great way to put a bottom on this market or take advantage of it one more year. So must use most important slide of the day, use all legal signatures, full legal signatures on your documents. Don't let your adjusters throw all your production records together if you have records to separate it out. And most importantly, don't wait to turn in a claim if you think you have one. Super easy to write, just sign off on the claim later. But if you even remotely think you have a claim, turn one in. And then what do we suggest? Okay, last slide. What do we suggest you do? So most guys that are at our agency are at 75% in revenue protection on most crops and enterprise units. Reason you don't go above that is because you lose a lot of your subsidy once you get above 75. It's cheaper to do that with SCO and ECO probably. So, and consider 70% and if in optional units. Take ECO and SCO on all crops with the new subsidy levels. PLC at the FSA until prices rebound, because those programs at least are guaranteed to pay while we're in this depressed price market. And then seriously consider an LRP on your cattle. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I'm sorry it was more like 30 minutes instead of 15, but there was a lot of changes this year we wanted to touch on. So thanks again for taking the time to review this, and we'll be in contact with you to see if you're one of our customers, if you want to change anything for this coming crop year.